I woke to the sound of wedding bells in a hospital room. Not the church kind. The sound floated out of a phone speaker, bright and cruel, carried by my cousin Tasha's shaking hands. On the screen, under a white arch covered in lilies, my husband, Darius Cole, stood in a silver tux, smiling like a man who had been forgiven by heaven and given a brand new name. He laced fingers with a woman in a glittering dress I'd never seen before. Behind them, the words "Forever Cole" shimmered in gold. "Amara," Tasha whispered, her eyes wet. "He went through with it. He didn't even wait for you to get out of ICU." The IV pump hummed beside my ear. The room held that clean hospital smell. Bleach and something fake like lemon. Pain stitched my side where the surgeons had put me back together after the accident. I blinked to clear the fog. I had been slipping in and out for days, held up by tubes and prayers, fed soup by nurses with calm voices. And now, as my pulse steadied on the monitor, my life slipped out of my hands and walked down an aisle. On the screen, the officiant lifted a Bible. "Do you, Darius, take—" The video shook as Tasha covered her mouth. I could see the pews filled with faces I knew, Darius's mother in her hat, his cousin who always bragged about real estate, men from his barbershop nodding like a chorus. I should have been there. I should have been sitting upright at least, telling him no woman could step into our home till I breathed and spoke. Instead, I lay in a hospital bed in Atlanta, dressed in a gown that tied crooked at the back. My grandmother's voice came to me like a breeze through dry palm fronds. "When a man eats alone, he forgets the one who planted the yam." Gran Neka used to say things like that when she shelled groundnuts in our kitchen in Lagos, when I was a child and hardship was a teacher with a hard cane. "Life is a drum," she'd say. "If you strike it with disrespect, it will answer you louder." I swallowed. "Turn it up," I whispered. The officiant's voice grew clear. "In sickness and in health." Darius kept his head high. People always said he had presence. That was part of what drew me in. A man who walked like he already knew the answer to any door he knocked on. But in that moment I saw something else. Impatience and relief. The look of a man who believed he had outrun a storm. He believed I was finished. "Do you?" the officiant repeated. "I do," Darius said. Heat rose in my chest, not from fever, but from the memory of vows I had kept, and from the secret I had carried like a locked calabash for 7 years. The accident had smashed bone, but the secret under my ribs remained whole, my assets. People who looked at me saw a tech consultant with tidy nails, a woman who moved between Atlanta and Lagos, who answered family calls and sent school fees with a smile. They didn't see the network of trusts in my maiden name, the quiet holdings in cocoa processing, logistics depots near Apapa, mineral royalties in Kogi, 2 venture funds in Delaware, and a healthcare platform I spun out in year 3 of our marriage. Darius, with all his style and talk of opportunity, never read my silence. He never asked why I never flinched when life turned expensive. He never knew the number, $800 million. The first time the auditors said it to me out loud, I laughed and cried in the same breath. I thought of Gran Neka's hands. I thought of my mother's small store where we sold plantains one by one. I thought of the day President's Road flooded and we had to lift our shoes above our heads to reach home. Wealth, to me, was a river with strong currents. You swim with wisdom or you drown with pride. So I built a bridge and never told Darius the length of it. He thought he married an ordinary woman. He started to treat me like one. The months before the accident were full of tiny cuts. He forgot my birthday dinner because of a pop-up meeting. He called my ideas cute. He came home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine and explained the scent with a laugh. We argued. He shouted. He went silent. Then he brought home an idea he called space. Space meant he slept at his friend's place and came back on Sundays like a visiting cousin. Space meant my heart stretched thin like fabric in the sun. Then came the night my brakes failed on Peachtree. People said the rain made the road slick as glass. The sedan spun like a coin. I hit the barrier and the world turned red. I don't remember the ambulance. I do remember waking to Tasha's voice and feeling the tubes and asking for water. Darius came once, stood by my bed and said, "I can't watch this, it's too much." Then he left a bag of roses on the tray table and didn't come back. The next time I saw him was on Tasha's phone saying, "I do" to another woman. The officiant turned to the bride. "Do you—" The video cut to Darius's mother smiling wide. When it reopened on the bride, the camera caught her profile. She was pretty in the way a knife is pretty, smooth, sharp, eyes that measure and add tacks. I didn't know her name. Maybe I had seen her once, the woman who returned a jacket to my porch with a note that said nothing at all. The room swayed. I took a breath. Pain stabbed my side, but anger steadied my hand. I reached for the nurse call button. My fingers missed it once, twice, then brushed the smooth plastic. I pressed it and kept pressing until the light blinked. "What are you doing?" Tasha whispered. "Tasha," I said, careful with each word. "Open the black folder in the drawer." She looked at me, then at the drawer, then at me again. "You want now?" "Open it." My grandmother used to say, "A goat that is meant to drown will not fear deep water, but a woman who has crossed the ocean without a boat learns to walk." The folder held the things I had never shown Darius. Trustee instructions, emergency contacts, a letter in my own hand with names and numbers. I had prepared it after the first time he raised his voice and walked out without closing the door, not because I feared him, but because I respected storms. The nurse stepped in, soft shoes whispering. "Ms. Amara, you pressed?" "I need to make a call," I said. On speaker. Her eyes flickered to the screen, to the wedding. She swallowed. "I can bring the unit phone." "No," I said. "Use mine." Tasha slid the folder into my lap. Papers shifted like feathers. On top was the card for Mr. Abel Mensah, a Ghanaian lawyer with a laugh like a drum and a mind like a machete. He had drawn the trust lattice with me, line by line, until it could hold a storm. "Dial, Abel," I whispered. Tasha tapped. The nurse hovered. Abel answered on the third ring with his careful voice. "Madam Amara." I didn't waste breath. "Clause T3, I said. "Immediate." He exhaled. "Understood. No questions. That's why I hired him." "Any exceptions?" "Yes," I said. "The school in Lagos, the clinic in Abeokuta, no one there should feel this thunder." "Of course," he said. Paper sounds came through the line. "Do you want notices to go out now?" I looked at the screen. Darius lifted the bride's veil. The band began to play something sweet. "Now," I said. The nurse watched, still. In her face I saw a young woman with a full week of double shifts and a faith that clung to her like a shawl. She reached for my hand and squeezed. "God is still God," she murmured, almost to herself. Tasha stared at me. "What did you just do?" "The river is changing course," I said. Abel's voice returned. "Done," he said. "Board seats locked, voting rights frozen, joint credit lines severed, personal guarantees withdrawn. If anyone tries to move capital, they'll meet me first." The monitor beeped steady and stubborn. On the screen, Darius kissed his bride. Confetti rose like white birds. The crowd clapped. My heart beat 3 times hard. "Tasha," I said, "zoom in, bottom left row." She pinched the screen, hands trembling. Faces grew larger. My mouth went dry. There, near the aisle, sat a man in a grey suit with a scar on his chin. A man I had not seen in years. A man who should never have known my address. His name was Kola K2 Adeyemi, a fixer from Lagos who ate secrets for breakfast and sold other people's futures by noon. Why was K2 at my husband's wedding? He touched his ear like a man listening to orders. He glanced straight into the camera, as if he could see me through the lens, through the wire, through the screen, through the hospital wall. "Abel," I said slowly, the drum in my chest turning to thunder. "We may have another fire to put out." As I spoke, the nurse's pager buzzed. She looked down and went pale. She lifted her eyes to me with a new kind of fear, the kind that tells you the ground under your feet has never been ground at all. "Ms. Amara," she whispered, "there's someone at the front desk asking for your chart. He says he's family. He has a letter declaring you deceased." Tasha's phone slipped in her hands and hit the bed with a thud. On the screen, the cake knife flashed like a blade in the sun. I pushed myself up, pain burning hot, and met the nurse's eyes. My grandmother's proverb rose in my throat like a war song. The masquerade that thinks daylight is its friend will learn the lesson of noon. "Lock this door," I said. "Call security and get me a wheelchair." Because if my husband could marry while I lay breathing, and if K2 could cross an ocean to stand in a church and smile, then someone had not only buried my marriage, they had tried to bury me, and I was not done living. The nurse slid the bolt with a quiet click that sounded louder than thunder. The hallway outside my room hummed with bed wheels and voices, but in here, time tightened like a rope. Tasha stood frozen, phone clutched to her chest. I could hear wedding music still spilling from the speaker, joy from another world stepping on the neck of mine. "Wheelchair," I reminded the nurse. "Please." She nodded fast and rushed out through the second door that led to the staff corridor. I turned to Tasha. "Pick up the folder. Put it under the blanket. If anyone asks, it's just extra sheets." Tasha obeyed with shaking hands. "Who is K2?" she whispered. "A man who sells trouble," I said, "and collects interest." Abel's voice came through the phone, steady as a metronome. "If someone is trying to declare you dead, they need paper, a death certificate, a physician's signature, or a judge willing to wade into deep water. None of that is easy." "K2 knows how to make hard things look easy," I said. "He knows people in offices who forget their father's name when they see cash." "Do you want me to dispatch a partner to the hospital?" Abel asked. "Yes," I said, "and call Detective Imani Brooks. Use the number from the Acadia case file. Tell her it's me." "The one who moved to Atlanta PD?" Abel asked. "The same," I said. "She owes me a favor, and she hates men who think documents are magic." I slid my legs over the side of the bed. Pain lit up my ribs like struck matches. I breathed through it. The wedding music on Tasha's phone softened to clapping. I pictured Darius lifting a glass and saying words that used to be ours. In that same breath, a face rose from my memory the first day I met him. We were at Faith's Grill on Auburn Avenue. Griot on the plate, High Life on the speakers, laughter bouncing off the old brick. He held the door for my cousin and me like a man who knew small courtesies could open big gates. He had that voice you could lean on, warm and quick. And he made me think of nights on my grandmother's veranda, where the air smelled like rain and mango leaves. We talked football and jollof and business. We argued about Lagos traffic and Atlanta rent. He called me Amara the Builder because I loved making ideas stand. He said he wanted to build with me. Maybe he meant it once. When my father died and my mother's health dipped, Darius lifted chairs and cooked pepper soup and drove us to church. He took my mother's hand and kissed it the way men used to do when men still knew that respect was wealth. He had a way of making a room believe in him. I let that belief cover the parts of him I didn't want to see. His quick temper, how he counted favors like coins, how he grinned too long at women who liked a man with a good watch. You don't fall in love with a person all at once. You fall in love with their story. And I let Darius tell me a story that made him the hero and me the harbor. The staff door opened again. The nurse rolled in a wheelchair and a hospital security guard stepped in behind her. Broad shoulders, quiet eyes, the kind of man who had worked nights long enough to recognize storms from far away. "Name's Officer Clay," he said, keeping his voice low. "Front desk says a man came in with a letter. Claims next of kin for you. Says you're deceased. We asked him for ID and a court order. He showed a notarized affidavit. Looks real, but it smells wrong." "Describe him," I said. "Tall," Clay said. "Grey suit, scar on his chin, Nigerian accent. Calm like a cat at the edge of a bowl of milk." I nodded. "K2. Clay's eyebrows rose. "He didn't give a name." "He never uses one when trouble is working," I said. The nurse lowered the wheelchair locks with her foot. "You can't just walk out," she said kindly but firmly. "You had surgery. You need to move slow." "I'll move like a woman who still wants tomorrow," I said. I pressed my palm against the mattress and stood. The room tilted. The world wavered. I held the bed rail and waited till the floor agreed with me again. Tasha moved to my side. her small frame a post for me to lean on. Clay lifted a hand. Before we go anywhere, I called in a supervisor, and I paged a hospital attorney. If someone is trying to mess with your status, we lock it down from the inside too. Good, I said, but I won't hide while someone writes me out of my own life. Clay's radio crackled. Copy that, a voice said. Legal is en route, and Ms. Brooks from APD is 5 minutes out. I smiled for the first time since the bells. Detective Brooks moves like Lagos rain, I murmured to Tasha. Fast and without apology. We waited. I tried not to look at the phone, but my eyes kept sliding there. The wedding video had moved to the reception. Darius spun his new bride, his laughter bright and careless. He always loved a crowd more than a quiet room. My mind drifted to my grandmother again. She used to say, when a lizard falls from a high tree and survives, it nods to praise itself because no one else saw the danger. I had fallen and survived more than once. Visa lines that felt like long hunger, nights coding till dawn, deals that went sideways until I pulled them straight, cousins whose school fees arrived like a last-minute miracle, my mother's clinic fees that swallowed months like minutes. I had learned to be my own applause. Maybe I had clapped so quietly that Darius forgot the music came from me. The door opened. A tall woman in a navy suit filled the frame, badge at her hip, hair in tight curls that meant business. Detective Brooks scanned the room with eyes that tagged details and filed them. Wheelchair, security guard, cousin with a phone, woman in hospital gown standing like she dared the floor to talk back. She looked at me and her face softened a notch. Amara, she said, you always find the worst thunderstorms. I just lie there, I said, and they come to me. She cracked a smile. Hospital counsel is securing your chart. Front desk is stalling your friend. We'll handle him, but I need to hear everything. Short version, I said. My husband married another woman an hour ago while I'm in this bed. The man outside has a paper saying I'm dead. He's not here to send flowers. Brooks's eyes flicked to Tasha's phone, the wedding scene reflected in her pupils. What's his angle? She asked. Money, I said. Control access. If I'm legally dead, someone can trigger survivor clauses, dissolve marital property, redirect accounts, and cancel my signatures. My husband believes I'm ordinary. The man in the lobby knows I am not. Clay's radio crackled again. Supervisor's here, it said. And legal is asking if Ms. Amara has a healthcare proxy. I looked to Tasha. She knew the answer, but I spoke it. I do, in my maiden name, not my married one. It's in the folder. Abel built it. Smart, Brooks said. You always did play chess. I thought of a night 2 years ago, Darius's voice soft after a fight. Babe, you know I'd never leave you, he said, stroking my hair. You're my whole story. He meant it then, maybe, but love without discipline is like a drum with a hole. No matter how hard you beat it, it won't sing. Brooks tapped her pen against a small notebook. We're going to box this in. Security will hold the lobby. Legal will lock your status. I'll interview your visitor and see what he knows. In the meantime, you sit. I have one call to make first, I said. Then I'll sit. Brooks studied me. To who? To Mama Cole, I said. Darius's mother. Tasha's head snapped up. Why her? Because she loves appearances more than truth, I said. If she hears I'm walking out of here, she'll run to the wedding with a story. And stories can break a party faster than police lights. Brooks nodded once. 2 minutes, she said. Then chair. Tasha dialed. The ring dragged. A voice answered, sweet and sharp. Hello? Mama Cole, I said. It's Amara. Silence. Then a laugh that creaked like an old gate. Ah, my dear, I'm so sorry to hear of your condition. The Lord gives and takes. The Lord hasn't taken me anywhere, I said softly. I'm calling to tell you I'm alive. I'm leaving the hospital today. Silence again, this time deeper, a room with the lights suddenly out. Then, you should rest, she said. Stress is not good for the sick. I'll rest when I'm home, I said. And Mama, please tell Darius congratulations. I will see him soon. I ended the call. Brooks lifted an eyebrow. You enjoy setting fires and watching who runs. "Fires show us where the dry grass hides," I said. The staff door opened. A small woman with glasses and a leather folder stepped in, cheeks flushed from a fast walk. "Hospital counsel," she said. "We put a hold on any changes to Ms. Amara's status. We've alerted administration. And we called the County Vital Records office. No death certificate was issued for you." She pushed her glasses up. "Whatever he has, it's fake." "Good," Brooks said. "Officer Clay, walk me to the lobby. Keep your radio open." Clay nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Brooks turned to me. "Sit. If we're going to play, we play smart." I lowered myself into the chair. The world steadied. I tucked the folder under the blanket, pressed my palms flat to stop the tremor in my fingers, and listened to the footsteps fade. Tasha leaned in. What if K2 brought more than paper? My mouth was dry. He always does. 10 minutes stretched like rubber. The wedding music on the phone faded to a toast. I heard clinking glasses, and Darius's voice say something about new beginnings. My lips went numb. The hospital clock ticked loud. The air conditioner sighed. Clay's radio spat noise, then Brooks's voice poured through, clipped and cool. "We've got a problem," she said. "Lobby camera shows your visitor speaking to a man in a silver tux jacket who just walked in from the parking lot. He signed the guest log as D. Cole. The two of them are asking for a private room." Tasha gasped. My chest tightened like a fist. Darius had left his own reception. Brooks continued, voice lower. "And there's more. The fake affidavit names a court-appointed conservator over your estate for posthumous affairs. The conservator's name is your husband's." The nurse at my shoulder squeezed my arm. I tasted metal in my mouth. For a second I heard only my grandmother again, her voice flat with warning. When the hawk smiles at the chick, the sky is about to teach a lesson. The door handle turned, slowly, deliberately. Someone on the other side tried it once, twice, found it locked, then knocked 3 times. Soft knocks like a friend's, like a habit. "Mrs. Cole?" a man's voice called, smooth as palm oil. "It's hospital administration. We need your signature on a release." The voice was wrong in a way my bones understood before my brain did. Clay wasn't back. Brooks wasn't back. There was no overhead announcement. And the voice that said administration had a Lagos rhythm I knew too well. Tasha's eyes flashed at mine. The nurse backed toward the staff door, fingers on the alarm. I rolled my chair an inch closer to the bed, my breath slow and steady so my ribs didn't crack open from anger. "Who is it?" I called, calm and loud enough to carry to the hallway camera. A pause. Then the same soft voice, closer to the wood now, almost inside the room. "Family," he said. "We came to take care of you." The handle turned again, this time with a key sliding into the lock. The key scraped inside the lock like metal teeth biting bone. My body tensed. Tasha grabbed my wrist, her eyes wide with terror. The nurse pressed the alarm button by the staff door, her finger trembling but firm. A shrill buzz filled the room for 2 seconds before falling silent again. Hospital alarms don't scream forever. They whisper once and wait for the right ears. I wheeled closer to the bed and pulled the folder fully under the blanket. My grandmother's words circled in my head. When the snake enters the cooking pot, it's not searching for warmth. It's after the meat. The lock clicked. Slowly the handle pushed down. "Family," the voice repeated from the other side. Calm, smooth, dangerous. "Family doesn't need keys," I said, raising my voice so the security cameras would catch every syllable. A pause, then a chuckle. "Sharp tongue. Even on your deathbed." The door rattled once more before a deeper, stronger voice cut in from the hall. "Step away from that door." Detective Brooks. Relief swept through me, but it didn't last. A loud thud shook the wall like 2 men colliding. Tasha gasped and clutched my arm. The nurse backed further into the staff corridor. The sound of fists, of shoes scuffling, of something heavy striking the ground bled into the room. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" Brooks shouted. Then silence. Thick, dangerous silence. Seconds stretched until the knob finally released and the door opened, but not from the intruder's hand. Brooks entered, breath sharp, one hand on her sidearm. Behind her, Officer Clay dragged K2 in cuffs, his grey suit rumpled, his eyes still calm, like a man who expected storms and learned to smile in the rain. "Your friend tried to bluff his way through with a forged key," Brooke said, shutting the door with her foot. "Lobby cameras caught him passing it off. Good thing hospital security is quicker than he thought." K2 smirked at me. "Still alive. You don't know how many men would pay to keep it that way." I held his gaze. "And you don't know how many men will starve because they thought I was weak." Brooks jerked her head toward Clay. "Take him downstairs. Holding until we process charges. Fraud, attempted trespass, maybe conspiracy if we can tie him to the affidavit." K2 didn't resist. He only smiled wider. "This game isn't mine alone, Amara. The groom knows the rules too." The words hit me harder than the accident ever did. Darius wasn't just a husband who forgot vows. He was a man signing paperwork behind my back, letting strangers carry letters of my death. When the door closed behind them, the room felt smaller, heavier. Tasha sat slowly on the edge of the bed. "Amara, what if Darius planned this from the start?" I shook my head, but the seed had already sprouted. From the very first day he called me Amara the Builder. Had I been a project to him, a bridge to cross, a treasure chest to open, a river he thought was shallow? The nurse returned from the staff hall, face pale. "Miss Amara, hospital administration is insisting you stay until you're discharged officially. They said walking out now would be unsafe medically and legally, but..." She hesitated. "Detective Brooks ordered extra security outside your room until morning." I breathed out. For the first time, a fraction of safety returned. Yet deep inside, the war had just begun, because Darius knew now, whether K2 told him or not, that I wasn't a ghost. He knew his sick wife in the hospital wasn't just surviving, she was fighting. And he knew nothing about the $800 million river flowing under my name. But soon he would, because tomorrow when I step out of this hospital, I will not just be Amara Cole, the forgotten wife. I will be Amara the Builder again. And the house my husband just built with another woman, I would decide if it stands or if it burns. The night in the hospital stretched long, like a drumbeat that would not stop. Every tick of the wall clock reminded me that out there, my husband was still dancing with another woman, smiling under lights he thought would never dim. But in here, in this cold room with white walls, I was planning. Not just planning to survive, planning to reclaim everything. Nurse Lillian checked my IV one last time before dimming the overhead light. "Try to sleep," she whispered. "But how do you sleep when your life is being rewritten like a bad story?" Tasha sat in the visitor's chair, her head resting against the wall, but her eyes were wide open. "Amara," she said softly, "what if he doesn't stop? What if Darius keeps trying until he succeeds?" Her words floated in the quiet, heavy and sharp. I stared at the ceiling. "Then he'll learn that I am not a page he can erase." My grandmother's voice returned to me again, her proverbs like lamps in the dark. "The lion may forget its strength, but the forest never forgets the roar." I had forgotten who I was, living in Darius's shadow, letting him define me as just his wife. But the forest of my life, the businesses, the assets, the networks, still remembered my roar. And it was time I let the sound out again. At dawn, Detective Brooks returned with fresh eyes and hot coffee. Her navy suit looked pressed, her pen already tapping. "Our friend K2 is being processed. He's not saying much, which means he's saying everything. Someone paid him to try this stunt." "Darius," I said, no hesitation. Brooks tilted her head. "Maybe. But men like K2 don't work for free. And your husband just had an expensive wedding. That means money moved, a lot of it. So I thought of the $800 million in assets spread across trusts and shell companies. To Darius, my world had always looked simple. To K2, it looked like prey. "Detective," I said, "let them dig. Let them try. Every lock has a key, but I hold the master ring." She leaned against the wall. "Then what's your move?" I wheeled closer to the window. The blinds were half open, letting in a blade of Atlanta sun. First, I leave this hospital. Then I remind Darius, and everyone watching, that I am not the weak one in this story. By mid-morning, the hospital attorney came with papers. You're medically stable for discharge, though I strongly advise rest. I'll rest when the storm passes, I replied. Clay, the security guard, wheeled me through the halls while Tasha carried the black folder clutched to her chest. Every nurse and doctor we passed gave me that look, half pity, half awe, because the story had already spread. News in a hospital runs faster than blood. They all knew the woman whose husband remarried while she was still alive. When we reached the front entrance, sunlight washed over me. I inhaled deeply. Freedom always smells different, like dust and wind mixed with risk. Brooks's unmarked car waited at the curb. "You'll ride with me," she said. "Safer this way." The ride to my home was silent at first. The city moved around us, honking cars, street vendors, the smell of roasted corn and barbecue drifting through open windows. Atlanta pulsed with life, but inside me was only one thought. He left me here to die. When we turned into my neighborhood, I felt the shift. Neighbors stood in clusters, whispering, pointing. Some waved shyly, unsure whether to greet me like a survivor or avoid me like a ghost. Word of betrayal travels fast. It sticks like oil on skin. The house came into view. Our house, built with my money but claimed with his pride. The blinds were open, the lawn freshly cut, the driveway too clean. Darius wanted the world to see perfection, even if it was built on lies. Clay opened the car door and helped me down. My legs trembled but held. Tasha steadied me on one side, the black folder still clutched like a baby. "Ready?" Brooks asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm going in anyway." The moment I stepped inside, I smelled it, her perfume. Sweet, heavy, too strong. The new bride had already claimed her space. A gold scarf lay tossed on the couch. 2 champagne glasses rested on the table. Tasha hissed through her teeth. She moved in already. Anger rose like fire in my chest. She thinks a crown sits on her head just because he placed it there. Brooks scanned the room with careful eyes. No one's here, probably still at the reception or honeymoon. Good, that gave me time. I went straight to the study. My fingers traced the mahogany desk, the drawers Darius never bothered to open because he thought paperwork was my burden, not his. I slid out the false bottom and pulled free a slim laptop, encrypted, firewalled, secured with layers only Abel and I understood. "This," I said to Brooks, "is the river." She raised an eyebrow. "Your assets?" I nodded. Every cent, every property, every company, 800 million flowing quietly under his feet. He never knew. Tasha whispered, "Amara, you're about to go to war." "No," I corrected. "The war came to me. I'm about to finish it." That night, as I sat in the study scrolling through accounts, alerts began popping. Unauthorized attempts to access one of the Delaware funds. Someone trying to reset passwords. Another request to liquidate mineral rights. "He's moving fast," Brooks said, watching over my shoulder. "Too fast," I murmured. "He thinks I'm still weak. He thinks my silence is surrender." I typed in commands, shutting doors, locking gates, freezing flows. Each keystroke was a drumbeat of defiance. Tasha's phone buzzed with a message. She read it aloud, her voice shaking. He posted on social media. "New life, new beginnings. God restores what was lost." He tagged her. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. God restores what was lost? Then let God restore the lesson he's about to learn. It happened sooner than expected. The doorbell rang just past midnight. Brooks motioned for silence and peered through the side window. Her shoulders stiffened. "It's him." Darius stood on the porch, tux jacket gone, tie loose, eyes glittering with the kind of boldness that comes from thinking you've won. Beside him was his new bride, her hand looped through his arm like she owned the house. He knocked. "Amara, open this door." I wheeled closer, my pulse steady now. The lion in me had remembered its roar. "Why?" I called through the door. "So you can finish what you started?" Silence. Then his laugh, smooth as oil. "You're alive. That's unexpected. But you should know, Amara. Things have changed." "No, Darius," I said, gripping the armrest. "You're the one who's about to learn change." His bride sneered, her voice sharp. "You're nothing but a sick woman clinging to a past that doesn't belong to you anymore." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "And you're nothing but a visitor in a house you don't own." I slid the laptop open on the desk, tapped a final command, and looked at Brooks. "Detective, you might want to watch this." On the big screen in the living room, the accounts lit up one by one. Transfers blocked, properties frozen, credit cards denied, every access point shut down. Darius banged on the door, louder now. "What did you do?" I raised my voice, clear and steady, so every neighbor who might be listening could hear. "I did what I should have done years ago. I built an empire without you, Darius. $800 million in assets you never even knew existed. And tonight, every piece of it just slipped out of your hands." Gasps from outside. Even through the door, I heard the neighbors murmuring. The gossip that would spread tomorrow would be unstoppable. Darius pounded harder. "You lied to me." "No," I said softly. "I protected myself from you." Brooke stepped forward, hand resting on her holster. "That's enough," she called. "Step off the porch, Mr. Cole. This house is under police protection until further notice." But Darius didn't move. His pride wouldn't let him. And that was when his bride made the mistake. She screamed loud enough for the whole street to hear. "You fool, you never told me she had money." The words echoed through the night, sealing their fate. I pressed the intercom button by the door, so my voice carried outside. "You thought you buried me, Darius. But the dead do not hold pens, and I've just signed the beginning of your end." His fist slammed once more against the wood. "This isn't over, Amara. You'll regret this." I leaned closer to the mic. "No, Darius. You will." The porch light flickered, casting his face in half shadow. His bride pulled at his arm, panic in her eyes. Neighbors whispered louder. Brooks's phone buzzed with fresh alerts from the precinct. And then, just as the night seemed to settle, a black SUV rolled slowly down the street, its tinted windows glinting under the street lamp. It stopped right in front of the house. The back window slid down, and a familiar face leaned out. K2, smiling, free. He raised a phone and mouthed the words, "Round 2." The SUV engine growled and the car pulled away into the darkness, leaving only the echo of its promise. I gripped the arms of my chair, my heart steady, my eyes burning with fire, because this war was no longer just about betrayal. It was about survival. And the storm was only beginning. Viewers, what would you have done if you were in Amara's place? Would you have hidden your wealth from your spouse, or revealed it earlier? Comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking chapter. The silence after the SUV disappeared was heavier than the pounding on the door had been. The neighbors who had gathered outside whispered among themselves, but I could feel their eyes on my house. They weren't just curious, they were waiting. In every community, there are always people who wait for the collapse of a story so they can repeat it with new colors. Tonight, I had given them a performance. Tomorrow I would give them truth. Brooks's radio buzzed, pulling me back. "Units in pursuit of black SUV. Plate matches the alias K2 has been using. Driver is evading." She exhaled sharply, sliding her phone back into her pocket. "He's not gone for good, Amara. Men like him don't vanish, they circle." I nodded slowly. "Let him circle. The hawk can fly above, but the hen that guards her chicks always has her eyes open." My grandmother's words stayed lodged in my chest like an anchor. I would not be caught sleeping again. Darius was still on the porch, pounding. His pride made him blind. His new bride kept pulling his arm, but he jerked her away. "You can't shut me out, Amara," he shouted, voice breaking through the heavy wood. "We're married. That house is mine." His words might have fooled the neighbors, but not me. The title deed was in my maiden name. The trusts were locked under signatures only Abel and I controlled. Legally, Darius had nothing. Emotionally, he had even less. I pushed myself up, every muscle in my side burning. "Detective, open the door," I said. Brooks frowned. "That's not smart." "It's necessary." Clay unlocked the bolt, ready with his hand near his holster. The door swung wide, and there stood Darius, sweat beading his forehead, his white shirt untucked, his bride glaring behind him like a queen who'd just discovered her crown was made of paper. "You played me," he said, voice trembling with rage. "No," I replied calmly, standing tall in my weakness. I protected myself from a man who would abandon his wife in a hospital bed to chase perfume and applause. His bride hissed, "You lied to him. You hid money." I turned my eyes on her, steady and sharp. "Young woman, I didn't hide money. I built a life before I even met him. That life is mine. You walked into a house that was never his to give you." Darius stepped forward, but Clay blocked him. Brooks spoke firmly. "Step back, Mr. Cole. This is a legal matter now." He raised his voice, ignoring her. "You think freezing accounts and playing games will stop me? You owe me, Amara. You owe me everything I invested in this marriage." I laughed then, not the laugh of a woman broken, but of one who had survived too much to be shaken by empty threats. "What you invested?" My words cut like glass. "Do you mean the birthdays you forgot, the lies you told, the nights you disappeared while I nursed a broken body? Or maybe you mean the flowers you dropped on a hospital tray and called love?" "No, Darius, I don't owe you. You owe me the years I wasted believing you were worthy of me." The neighbors gasped. I could hear the rustle of them shifting, the electricity of gossip already spreading. His bride pulled his arm again, humiliated now that she realized the street was listening. "Let's go," she hissed. "This isn't worth it." But Darius wasn't a man who knew when to leave. He leaned forward, his voice lower but poisoned. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Amara. That money of yours, it's going to be mine, if it's the last thing I do." I met his eyes and whispered so softly that only he and the detective could hear. "You've already lost, Darius, because you underestimated me." Brooks raised her hand. "That's enough. You're trespassing now. Leave before I arrest you for harassment." For a moment I thought he would test her, but finally, with a sound between a laugh and a growl, he turned sharply and stormed off the porch. His bride stumbled behind him, her face flushed with shame. The crowd began to disperse, whispering louder now, eager to carry the story to anyone who hadn't heard it yet. When the door shut again, I felt the weight of the night settle on my shoulders. Tasha placed the folder back in my lap. "He's not done," she said nervously. "No," I agreed. "But neither am I." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw K2's smile from the SUV window. Round 2. That was his promise. He wasn't bluffing. And Darius, whether he worked with K2 willingly or out of desperation, was dangerous now that he knew money existed. By morning, the battle had already shifted. Alerts pinged across my laptop. Attempts to pressure one of the cocoa factories into transferring ownership. Messages to Delaware asking for emergency liquidation. Darius had allies. He had men who understood only greed. But I had built my empire on more than money. I had built it on foresight. I called Abel at dawn. "Activate Protocol 3, I said. His voice was sharp with focus. "That means public filing. Are you ready for that storm?" "Yes," I replied. "Better the world hears the truth from me than a lie from them." That afternoon, the papers filed across courts and registries, declarations of assets under my maiden name, public records of ownership, and legal notices that placed every property and company under direct protective injunction. My name, Amara Okafor, was suddenly on every business page, not as a woman left behind in a hospital bed, but as the billionaire no one saw coming. The news spread like wildfire. By evening, the story was on TV, on blogs, on every gossip page. Atlanta woman, abandoned by husband in hospital, revealed as hidden billionaire heiress. Some headlines were cruel, others sympathetic, but all of them carried one truth. Darius was exposed and I was no longer invisible. The phone rang non-stop. Distant cousins, old classmates, journalists begging for interviews. But one call made my blood run cold. "Amara," A familiar voice purred through the line. It was K2. Congratulations on your little revelation, but remember, when the world knows your wealth, the wolves smell blood. Round 2 has begun. The line went dead before I could answer. I stared at the phone in my hand, my chest rising and falling. The storm was here. Darius had betrayed me. K2 had marked me. The world had discovered me. But I was Amara the builder. I had survived worse, and I would not stop until every enemy who tried to bury me was standing in the hole they dug for me. Viewers, tell me, if your spouse betrayed you and tried to erase you, only to discover you were wealthier than they could imagine, what would you do? Would you forgive, or would you fight back? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share this story with friends. You don't want to miss the next shocking twist. The morning after the headlines broke, the world outside my window no longer felt the same. Before I could step into a grocery store or sit in a cafe and be invisible, just another woman in a headscarf picking out bread or sipping coffee. Now, every glance lingered. Every whisper felt like it was about me. My name was on people's tongues, not because of the work I had done quietly for years, but because betrayal had forced me into the light. The phone rang without pause. Journalists wanted comments. Old acquaintances wanted reconnections. Business rivals wanted negotiations. Even pastors who had never once visited my hospital bed were calling to say they had always prayed for me. I silenced most of the calls. In war, not every knock at the gate deserves an answer. Tasha sat on the couch scrolling through social media. Amara, you're everywhere. Some are calling you the hidden queen of Atlanta. Others say you're proof that men marry without knowing the gold in their own homes. She paused, looking troubled. And some are calling you a liar. They think you tricked Darius by keeping secrets. I closed my laptop slowly. Let them talk. A lion doesn't explain why it roars. But deep inside, I knew the noise was only the beginning. Darius would not accept humiliation in silence, not with the whole city laughing at him. And K2, his warning still echoed in my ears. Round 2. Wolves smell blood. The doorbell rang. Brooks, still in her navy suit, stepped in with Clay behind her. She carried a folder, her eyes sharper than yesterday. We've got problems, she said without preamble. K2 posted bail. The man has money and friends who aren't afraid to risk it for him. Surveillance shows him visiting 3 places since his release. Your husband's new condo, a law office downtown, and an abandoned warehouse on the south side. Abandoned warehouse, Tasha repeated nervously. That doesn't sound like paperwork. It isn't, Brooks replied. It sounds like planning. I inhaled deeply, the hospital smell still clinging to my memory. Then we don't wait for them to strike. We move first. Brooks tilted her head. What do you have in mind? I built my empire quietly, I said. No one noticed because I never sought cameras. But now that the light is on me, I will use it. If they want to make me a headline, then I will control the story. Tasha frowned. But how? I looked at Brooks. Do you remember Pastor Elias's foundation dinners? Brooks nodded slowly. Those events with governors and CEOs in the same room, smiling for cameras. I funded them, I said, anonymously. Tonight I will attend. Not as Darius's wife, not as a victim, as Amara Okafor, the woman who built and survived. If Darius shows his face there, the world will see the difference between him and me. And if K2 is watching, he'll learn that intimidation cannot shake a woman who stands in her truth. Brooks considered it, tapping her pen against her thigh. It's risky. Public gatherings are unpredictable. All wars are risky, I said quietly, but silence is death. That evening I prepared. I did not choose the muted gowns I wore for Darius's parties, where he wanted me to look elegant, but never brighter than him. I chose a deep emerald dress, the color of strength and rebirth. My hair was braided close to my scalp, adorned with golden cuffs the way my grandmother had once braided me for school prize-giving day. I was not dressing for vanity. I was dressing for war. The hall was already full when we arrived. Photographers' flashes burst like fireworks. People turned, whispers rising as they saw me step out of Brooks's car. Some gasped, some clapped politely, others stared as though seeing a ghost. I walked with my back straight, pain still stabbing my side but hidden under resolve. Inside, the air buzzed with perfume and power. Politicians shook hands with businessmen, pastors blessed people with wide smiles, and journalists hovered like vultures waiting for scraps. When I stepped onto the stage beside Pastor Elias, the room hushed. He raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we welcome a woman whose name has filled every corner of our city in the past 24 hours. She is not here because of gossip. She is here because she represents resilience, wisdom, and strength. Please welcome Amara Okafor." Applause erupted, louder than I expected. My hands didn't shake when I took the microphone. I looked across the room and saw eyes wide with curiosity, envy, admiration, and suspicion. "My story is not the one the blogs tell," I began, my voice firm. "Yes, I lay in a hospital bed while my husband married another woman. Yes, men tried to erase me with papers and lies. But my story is not betrayal, my story is building. While others slept, I worked. While others mocked, I planned. And while others thought I was finished, I rose again. Tonight, I stand not as anyone's victim, but as my grandmother's granddaughter, the girl who sold plantains in Lagos, the woman who built an empire across 2 continents. The applause rose again. I felt my grandmother's spirit in the room, smiling with pride. But as the clapping filled my ears, my eyes caught movement near the back of the hall. A man in a grey suit, calm scar on his chin. K2. He leaned casually against a pillar, smiling as though the speech amused him. He clapped, slowly, deliberately, his eyes locked on mine. My stomach tightened. He had come to show me that no stage, no spotlight, no applause could protect me from his reach. And then, beside him, I saw Darius. His tux pressed, his bride on his arm, both of them wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They had come to watch too. The crowd didn't notice them yet. The cameras were still flashing at me. But I knew. This was round 2. I raised my chin, refusing to let fear show. "I know the world is watching," I said into the microphone. "And I welcome it. Because truth does not hide. Betrayal may win applause for a night, but wisdom wins respect forever. To those who think they can erase me, I say, I am not the kind of woman you bury. I am the kind of woman who plants herself deeper." The hall erupted in cheers, but my eyes never left the back of the room, where K2's smile widened and Darius whispered something into his bride's ear. And at that moment, the chandelier lights above flickered once, twice before going completely dark. The hall plunged into darkness. Screams rose, footsteps pounded, and in the chaos I knew the storm had just arrived inside these walls. The hall was swallowed in sudden darkness, the kind that makes your heart trip over itself because the world you knew a second ago has vanished. I could hear the sharp intake of breaths, the shuffle of heels against polished floors, and the crack of a glass shattering somewhere close to the buffet. Voices collided, panicked, confused, some angry, some afraid. "Stay calm," Pastor Elias shouted, but his voice was only one among many. I gripped the microphone stand tightly, my eyes straining to adjust. Somewhere near the back of the room I heard it, a slow, deliberate clap, then another. The sound echoed in the dark. K2. The lights flickered once, weak, like a candle in wind, then went out again. People screamed louder. Someone rushed toward the doors, but a heavy thunk announced they were locked. My pulse raced. I could hear Tasha's voice, faint but frantic. "Amara, Amara, where are you?" "I'm here," I called, my voice steady even though my hands trembled. The air shifted around me. In darkness, you feel movement before you see it. A presence approached, quiet, calculated. I held my breath, then a whisper near my ear. 800 million makes you shine bright, Amara, but in darkness, you are just another woman. My skin prickled. K2. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne. Sharp, metallic, like coins rubbed together. "You failed once already," I whispered back. And tonight the whole city knows my name. You can't bury me." He chuckled, low and menacing. "I don't bury, my dear. I collect, and everything that shines eventually belongs to me." Before I could respond, the emergency lights hummed to life, casting the hall in a dim red glow. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Faces emerged from the shadows. Some people were rushing for their phones. Others clung to one another. And there, under the weak crimson light, I saw them. Darius and his new bride, standing close to K2, their faces caught between smugness and unease. Darius raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need your attention." His tone was commanding, the same voice he had once used when toasting at our anniversary dinners. "My wife," he gestured at me, as though the word wife wasn't a knife in my chest, "has been misleading everyone. She kept her fortune hidden, even from me. Tonight, I stand here to tell you that her so-called empire was built on lies." A murmur spread through the hall. Phones were raised higher, recording every word. I stepped forward, ignoring the ache in my ribs. "Lies?" I said, my voice carrying clear despite the chaos. "The only lie here is the man who promised to love me in sickness and in health, then abandoned me on a hospital bed. The only lie is the marriage you celebrated yesterday, while pretending I was dead." The crowd gasped again, louder this time. K2 smiled faintly, his eyes darting between us like a man enjoying a play. He thrived on drama, on the spectacle of broken lives. Darius's bride finally spoke, her voice high and cutting. "You think you're strong because you have money? But you're weak. You'll always be weak. No man will stand by you now." I looked at her with pity, not anger. "And you will learn that standing beside a man without honor makes you smaller than him." Phones recorded every second. I knew by morning this confrontation would flood the internet. But this wasn't about headlines anymore. This was about survival. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed against the wall. The emergency lights flickered again. Panic rose. People screamed, ducking. Brooks pushed her way through the crowd, hand on her weapon, Clay close behind her. "Everyone stay calm," Brooks barked. She scanned the room, eyes landing on K2. "You, hands where I can see them." K2 only smiled, lifting his hands slowly. "Detective, always a pleasure. But you should know, darkness is a friend to men like me." Another bang, this time near the back doors. They swung open violently, and a rush of night air filled the hall. Figures in dark clothes slipped inside. My chest tightened. These weren't guests. Brooks drew her gun. "Everyone down!" Chaos erupted. People screamed and scrambled for cover, tables overturned, glasses shattered. In the middle of the storm, K2's men moved with purpose, their eyes fixed on me. "Get her out!" Brooks shouted at Clay, but the aisle was already blocked. Tasha grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the side exit, but one of the men stepped into our path. His eyes were cold, his hands steady. "Ms. Okafor," he said quietly. "The boss wants a word." I stood tall, though my legs trembled. "Tell your boss he should learn to write letters." He smirked, reaching for me, only for Brooks to fire a warning shot into the ceiling. The sound cracked like thunder. "Step back," she ordered. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then the chandelier lights above sputtered and blazed back to life, flooding the hall with brilliance. And there he was, K2, standing in the center of it all, smiling like a man who had orchestrated the entire night. Darius and his bride stood behind him, their faces pale now under the unforgiving light. "Ladies and gentlemen," K2 said smoothly, raising his voice so all could hear, "tonight you witnessed a queen announce her throne, but even queens need protection, and who better to protect her than the man who already holds her secrets?" He turned his eyes on me, his smile sharp. "Amara, you will give me access to your empire, or this city will drown in stories you never wanted told." My pulse hammered in my ears. I could feel every eye in the hall on me. Brooks's gun was still raised. Clay had his hand on his radio. Tasha clutched my sleeve like a lifeline. And Darius, my husband, the man who had vowed to love me, smiled through his shame, certain that this was the moment I would break. I lifted my chin, my voice steady despite the storm. You think you hold me, K2. But let me remind you, storms cannot drown a woman who has already learned to breathe underwater. The crowd gasped, the cameras flashed, and in that moment, the battle lines were drawn. Because I knew this was no longer just about betrayal or money or even survival. This was war, and I was ready to fight. The hall was frozen for a moment, the kind of silence that feels like thunder holding its breath before it strikes. K2's men were spread across the exits, their dark suits making them look more like shadows than people. The guests huddled near overturned tables, whispering prayers under their breath, some recording with trembling hands. Darius stood behind K2, puffed up like a man who believed he had regained control, while his bride clung to his arm, her face a mask of both fear and greed. Detective Brooks's voice cut through the tension like a blade. K2, you're under arrest. Put your hands where I can see them. K2's smile didn't waver. He raised his hands slowly, theatrically, but his eyes stayed locked on me. Arrest? In front of all these witnesses? He chuckled, deep and cold. Detective, you know how quickly stories change. Tomorrow the papers won't say you arrested me. They'll say you disrupted a gathering, waving your gun while the billionaire widow's secrets spilled into the air. I'm not a widow, I said sharply, my voice echoing across the hall. My husband is standing right there, living proof that betrayal walks on 2 feet. The guests murmured louder, their eyes darting to Darius. He flinched, as though the words had struck him physically. His bride whispered something to him, but he shoved her off roughly, his pride boiling over. You've humiliated me enough, Amara, Darius shouted, his voice cracking. But this ends tonight. You can't hide behind detectives and lawyers forever. That money is mine. It belongs to me as your husband. The room gasped. Phones lifted higher. He had just said the quiet part out loud. I stepped forward, ignoring the ache in my side, ignoring the fear crawling up my spine. That money, I said firmly, was mine before you, during you, and it will be mine long after you. You never built with me. You only tried to eat what you did not plant. K2 clapped slowly, mockingly. A fine speech, but speeches don't stop bullets, nor do they stop the law when it bends toward those willing to pay for it. Brooks moved closer to me, her gun steady. Stay behind me, Amara. But I shook my head. No. Tonight isn't about hiding. Tonight, I show them who I am. I turned back to K2, my voice clear. You think you have power because you have men with guns. But true power doesn't come from threats. It comes from what survives when the guns fall silent. You want to take my empire? Then you'll have to face the same truth Darius never understood. Empires built on betrayal always collapse. The guests, still cowering, began to shift. I saw something in their eyes, respect, even in their fear. My words had become more than defense. They were fire spreading through the room. K2 tilted his head, his smile fading just a fraction. You talk like a queen, but queens fall every day. And so do kings who think they can steal crowns, I answered. At that moment, sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the high windows of the hall. The police had arrived in force. K2's men stiffened, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Brooks's radio crackled. Units on site, surrounding the building. She smirked at K2. Checkmate. But K2 only laughed softly, shaking his head. Detective, you never understood. Men like me don't need to win every battle. We just need to leave enough fire behind to make the victors choke on the smoke. He gave a sharp signal, and his men moved swiftly, not attacking but scattering. 2 slipped out the back, others blended into the panicked crowd, disappearing in the chaos. Within moments, K2 himself was gone, as though he had melted into the walls. The police stormed in seconds later, guns raised, but the shadows had already thinned. They managed to corner one man near the stage, but the rest were gone. The hall erupted in noise, guests crying, reporters shouting questions, officers shouting orders. Brooks holstered her weapon, furious, her jaw tight. He slipped us again. Clay came running, dragging one of K2's men by the arm. Got one, he won't talk yet. Good, Brooks snapped. We'll make him. I sank into a chair, my chest heaving. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind raw exhaustion. Tasha rushed to my side, clutching my hands. "Amara, this is too dangerous. You can't keep fighting them like this." But I shook my head, my voice hoarse but steady. "I can't stop now. If I do, they'll come back harder. Tonight proved one thing. This isn't just about my fortune anymore. It's about whether I live free or die with their chains around my neck." Darius stepped forward then, his pride still burning even though his allies had scattered. His bride trailed behind him, her eyes wide, her mouth tight. "You can't keep me out of this, Amara," he spat. "You can make speeches, you can freeze accounts, but the law is on my side. Marital property, inheritance rights. You think the courts will choose you over me?" I rose slowly, standing tall despite the trembling in my legs. "The courts will choose the truth, and the truth is this. You abandoned me, tried to declare me dead, and remarried while I lay in a hospital bed. No judge in this land will reward betrayal." His face twisted with rage, but before he could answer, Brooks stepped between us. "That's enough, Mr. Cole, you're leaving now." The police escorted him and his bride out, their protests drowned by the chaos of reporters shouting questions. Cameras followed them, capturing their humiliation for the world to see. When the hall finally began to empty, I sat back down, my whole body trembling. The chandelier above glowed bright again, mocking the darkness that had nearly consumed us. Brooks crouched beside me. "He won't stop, Amara, neither will K2. Tonight was a warning, tomorrow it will be something else." "I know," I whispered, "but I'm ready." Because I had learned something important in that hall. When you stand in your truth, even enemies with guns cannot silence you. But I also knew the war was not over. It was only changing shape. The next move would not be made in public. It would be in shadows, where K2 thrived, and where Darius would grow desperate. And I would have to meet them there. Viewers, I want to ask you, what would you do if your own spouse and strangers joined forces to erase you just to steal what you worked for? Would you forgive? Would you flee? Or would you fight back? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story, because the next chapter will take us even deeper into the fire. Sleep became a stranger. Even when the house was quiet and the neighbors had gone back to their lives, I lay awake, my mind a drum that would not stop beating. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the red emergency lights in the hall, K2's smile gleaming in the shadows, Darius's face twisted with greed, and the cameras flashing like lightning around me. By morning, the news had exploded. Every television station, every blog, every radio program was carrying the same story. Billionaire betrayal. Atlanta woman abandoned in hospital emerges as hidden mogul. Clips from the hall were everywhere. My words, Darius's demands, K2's taunts. The world was watching, and in their eyes, I was no longer invisible. I was a symbol, though I had never asked to be. But symbols attract fire. I sat in my study, laptop open, the black folder spread across the desk. Tasha sat opposite me, her face tired but determined. Detective Brooks had barely left my side, her badge on the table as though it too needed rest. "Amara," she said, leaning forward, "you have to understand something. K2 doesn't fight in the open. What happened last night was theater. His real war is fought in shadows, bank accounts, offshore transfers, bribes. He'll try to bleed you quietly, so that by the time the public notices you're already weak." I nodded. "And Darius?" Brooks's lips tightened. "He's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes, but they also make dangerous alliances. He thinks K2 can give him leverage. He'll cling to that until K2 chews him up and spits him out." I leaned back in my chair, pain shooting through my ribs. "Then we won't wait for them to move. We'll strike first." Tasha frowned. "But how? They have money, connections, and K2 has people who'll do anything for him." I opened the laptop, typing quickly, pulling up encrypted files that only Abel and I had access to. "K2 eats secrets. That's his weapon. But I have secrets too. His secrets." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Years ago," I said, my voice low, "one of my logistics depots in Lagos was targeted by smugglers, K2's men. Instead of calling the police, I called Abel. We traced the movement, followed the money. We didn't go after them then, we kept the records. Bank transfers, shell companies' names. Abel said to me, "Keep this. One day the forest will ask you to remember the paths of the hunters. That day is now." I slid the screen toward Brooks. Rows of names, numbers, and transfers glowed back. Offshore accounts, fake companies, properties registered under false IDs, enough to sink K2 and anyone tied to him. Brooks whistled softly. "You've been sitting on this for years?" I nodded. "I built my empire quietly, but I never closed my eyes to the vultures circling it. Now, those records will become my sword." Tasha leaned in, her eyes wide. "So what's the plan?" "Simple," I said. "Expose him, piece by piece, not just to the police. He can bribe them, not just to the courts. He can delay them, but to the public, to the banks, to the governments he hides money under. Once I shine a light on his shadows, even his allies will scatter." Brooks tapped the table. "That could work. But you have to be careful. He'll know it's you, and when men like him know they're cornered, they stop playing games." I closed the laptop with finality. "Let him come. I've already been to the grave and back. What more can he take from me?" That afternoon, Abel arrived from Ghana, his presence filling the study like armor. He was a man who carried laughter like a drumbeat, but eyes that cut like a machete. When he hugged me, I felt the weight of years of trust. "You've stirred the hornet's nest, Amara," he said, "but if it must be done, let us do it properly." We spent hours drawing the map, who to contact first, which leaks would cause the biggest cracks, which governments would act fastest. Each name we highlighted was a domino. Once the first fell, the rest would follow. But as the sun dipped, Tasha's phone buzzed with a message that turned my blood cold. It was a photo. Me, sitting in my study, the black folder on the desk, the laptop glowing. Taken through the window, a caption beneath, "We see you." Tasha dropped the phone with a cry. Brooks snatched it up, her face hard. "They're watching the house. He's already one step ahead." I stood, my legs trembling but my voice firm. "Then we move tonight, before they tighten the noose." We packed quickly. Documents, drives, the black folder. Clay drove us through back streets, avoiding main roads, while Brooks coordinated with units tailing us at a distance. But I knew K2 had eyes everywhere. He thrived on being 3 steps ahead. We arrived at a safe house Abel had arranged, a quiet bungalow on the outskirts of the city. Its walls were plain, its furniture simple, but its security was tight. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of peace. Until midnight. The first sign was the dog barking outside, then the crunch of tires on gravel. Brooks was on her feet instantly, gun drawn. Clay peered through the blinds. "SUV, same as last time." My chest tightened. He had found us. Headlights cut through the window, casting long shadows across the room. Then a voice, amplified by a megaphone, filled the night. "Amara, come out, you can't hide forever." "Darius," Tasha gasped. "He's with them?" I stepped to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to see. Darius stood in the driveway, flanked by 2 of K2's men. His face was wild, desperate, sweat glistening under the floodlights. "You think you're untouchable, Amara," he shouted. "You embarrassed me in front of the whole city. You froze me out like I was nothing. But I'm your husband, and what's yours is mine." I opened the door and stepped onto the porch, Brooks hissing at me to stay back. The night air was heavy, the stars hidden by clouds. "You were my husband," I said, my voice carrying across the gravel. "Now you are just a man who chose greed over love." He laughed, high and broken. "Love doesn't pay bills, Amara. Love doesn't build empires. Money does. And now that the world knows you have it, you think you can cut me out? Never." Behind him, K2 stepped from the SUV, calm as ever, his scar glinting in the light. "Enough drama," he said smoothly. "Amara, the documents. Hand them over, and this ends peacefully." I straightened my back, the wind tugging at my dress. "Peace is not built on theft. You want my empire? You'll have to burn the whole city to ashes, because I will not give you 1 stone of it." K2's smile widened. "Then ashes it shall be. He snapped his fingers. The men behind him raised weapons. Brooks raised hers in return. Clay shouted into his radio. Tasha clutched my arm, trembling, and in that charged silence, where a single spark could ignite war, I realized something. This battle would not be won with money or with speeches. It would be won with survival. The first shot cracked through the night, and everything erupted. The first gunshot shattered the night like glass breaking under a hammer. It echoed across the compound, sharp and unforgiving. Tasha screamed and ducked behind me, while Brooks shoved me back toward the doorway, her weapon raised, eyes scanning the shadows for the source of the shot. Clay barked into his radio, calling for backup, his voice clipped and urgent. The silence that followed was worse than the gunshot. It was the silence of men waiting for the right breath to move, the right twitch to strike. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Amara!" Darius's voice tore through the darkness, raw and desperate. "You'll regret this if you don't listen. Hand it all over. End this before it destroys you." I stepped forward, ignoring Brooks's hiss of protest. My ribs burned with every movement, but my voice came out steady, louder than I thought possible. "Darius, it already destroyed us the moment you betrayed me. You chose greed over love, and now you stand beside criminals calling yourself a man." The men flanking him shifted, their weapons glinting under the SUV's headlights. K2 stood behind them, calm, composed, his hands clasped like he was conducting a ceremony rather than orchestrating violence. "You talk like a queen," K2 said softly, his voice carrying unnaturally far. "But queens fall when their guards are weak." Brooks fired a warning shot into the gravel at their feet. "One more step and you'll be the one falling, Adeyemi." K2 didn't flinch. He only smiled. "Detective, you forget. I don't need to win the gunfight. I only need to make her bleed enough that her empire trembles. Fear is more powerful than bullets." Another SUV screeched into the driveway. Reinforcements. For a heartbeat, I feared more of K2's men. But then blue and red lights flashed, sirens wailed, and Atlanta PD spilled out with weapons drawn. Backup had arrived. "Drop your weapons," officers shouted, voices overlapping. "Hands in the air." The standoff exploded. K2's men scattered like shadows, firing wildly as they ran. Bullets tore into the walls of the bungalow, splinters flying. Officers dove behind vehicles, returning fire. Screams filled the air, Tasha's among them, as she clung to my arm, dragging me toward cover. Brooks shoved me behind a concrete pillar. "Stay down," she shouted before sprinting out into the open, her gun barking in rapid bursts. Clay tackled one of the armed men to the ground, wrestling the weapon from his grip. Darius ducked behind the SUV, dragging his new bride with him. His face was pale, twisted, not the face of a man in control, but of one who had realized too late that he had tethered himself to a snake. And through it all, K2 remained calm. He walked through the chaos as though bullets feared him, his eyes locked on me. Even as his men fell or fled, he moved forward, step by deliberate step, until he stood just a few yards away. 800 million, he murmured, his voice almost drowned by gunfire. "Do you know how many wars I could buy with that? How many cities I could own?" "You'll own nothing," I spat back, "because everything you build will rot under your feet." He smiled faintly, raising a small pistol from beneath his jacket. "Then let's see if your empire survives without you." The world slowed. I saw his finger tightening on the trigger. I saw Brooks turning, too far to stop him. I saw Tasha's eyes wide with horror. And then, unexpectedly, another figure moved. Darius. He shoved K2's arm upward just as the shot rang out. The bullet tore into the night sky instead of my chest. K2's calm cracked for the first time, fury flashing across his face. "You fool!" K2 roared, slamming an elbow into Darius's jaw. Darius stumbled but didn't fall. "I may be many things," Darius gasped, blood on his lips. "But I won't let you kill her. Not like this." The irony cut deep. Darius, the man who had abandoned me, who had conspired to erase me, now standing between me and death. But there was no time to unravel it. K2 swung the pistol toward me again. This time, Brooks's shot found its mark. The bullet struck K2 in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He dropped his weapon with a cry of pain, but still tried to lunge forward, his hand reaching for me like a drowning man grabbing for air. Clay tackled him hard, slamming him into the gravel. Officers swarmed, pinning him down, cuffing his hands behind his back as he shouted curses in Yoruba and English, his voice raw and furious. "Amara!" he bellowed as they dragged him toward the waiting police cars. "This isn't over! Empires fall! Queens fall! You'll fall!" The night quieted, leaving only the sound of sirens, radios crackling, and my own ragged breathing. Darius sank to his knees, holding his bruised jaw. His bride stood frozen, her hands trembling, her eyes darting between him and me. She looked like a woman who had just realized her golden ticket had been counterfeit all along. I walked forward slowly, every step heavy with exhaustion, but firm with purpose. I stood over Darius, my shadow cast long by the flashing lights. "You wanted to erase me," I said, my voice low but carrying. "You wanted my empire without my scars, my crown without my burden. Tonight you saw the truth. I survived everything you threw at me, and I'll keep surviving long after your name is nothing but a cautionary tale." He lifted his eyes, full of pain and something else. Regret, maybe, or shame. But it was too late. Officers moved in, cuffing him as well. "Fraud, attempted bigamy, conspiracy," Brooks said flatly. "You'll have time to think about everything you've lost." As they led him away, the neighbors began to gather at the edges of the street, drawn by the noise, the sirens, the flashing lights. Whispers floated through the night, but I didn't hear their words. I only heard my grandmother's voice again. The masquerade that dances in borrowed shoes will always stumble when the drumbeat changes. I turned back toward the house. Tasha threw her arms around me, sobbing with relief. Brooks gave me a tired smile, her gun now holstered. Abel stood in the doorway, his face calm, but his eyes burning with pride. "It's over," Tasha whispered. I shook my head gently. "No, the storm has only passed. The scars will remain. But I am still here, and so is everything I built." The next morning, the headlines changed. No longer just betrayal and scandal. They spoke of survival, of resilience, of a woman who faced betrayal and refused to fall. My name was no longer just whispered. It was spoken with respect, with awe, with fear from those who had tried to break me. And as I sat on the porch of that quiet bungalow, the sun rising, casting gold across the sky, I finally let myself breathe. I had been a wife, a victim, a symbol. But now I was something else entirely. I was free.